All right, we are going to do a replay review for ElementM on Bismuth Valley, which is an AV8 map. So just to kind of refresh Bismuth Valley, right? It's one of the most common lane maps played. It is 8v8 and it's all front. There should be no backline generally when this is played. So the strongest positions on Bismuth generally are the bot and top lanes, because this is 2v2 and this is more of a traditional 1v1, even though there's support. So you'll see stronger players go there. Alternatively, you see players sometimes play in the positions where the 4 geos are, because those will let them eco harder. So sometimes you'll see strong players kind of play in these positions as well. But generally speaking, the quote unquote carry positions are either top, bot, or somehow playing on those geos. For your role and for your lane, it's going to look something like this. So you are going to be playing against JD Mule, and it's a little bit of a more difficult lane to play as opposed to some other traditional lanes where you both just run in and fight, because it's really hard to push. And a lot of times your lane, you'll kind of end up here and there's 2 players fighting here and 1 player fighting here. But you can't really push into this because one commander with a D gun can kill like 10,000 metal worth of units. So instead, this lane a lot of time ends up kind of shoving into other lanes and trying to do other things in mid and help other places in mid. So you start on the front mexes, which I think is great. This isn't as much of one, but you'll see some of these start positions will have 2 mechs or 3 mechs. Sometimes people start in back, sometimes people start in front. Generally speaking, it's better to start in front, even if it's only a 2 mechs. The only change in your build is you would open 2 mechs and you'd go bots because they're cheaper, which lets you get to front faster, and then you can eat it and go vehicles. But for your position where you start with the 3 mechs, you can just open vehicles because you have it anyway. All right, let's see what happens here. So we are going to drop, and all right, so first mistake. Well, not mistake, but just this is like minor min maxing. The only thing is that, especially early on, just because of how Bar's economy is, the cleaner your initial gameplay can be, the bigger the outcome is later. So your commander dropped and then walked over here and started building. You can build some of these mexes a little bit off the patch. You don't have to build them right on it. So if you build it a little bit farther off, right, in range of your commander's build when you first have things queued, you can build it just off so that he doesn't have to move up there. But your commander always spawns facing south. So optimally, what makes more sense is to go max, max, and then wind. All right, what do we got here? What do we got? We have, looks like max, max, wind, max. Okay, so actually this is a great starting build, I think. So we've got max, max, wind, which makes sense. So the wind is good here. You can either go max, 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 solar, solar, or you can go max, max, wind, 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 and then lab. So we've got our one. Oh, are we going to do another? Ooh. Okay, so you don't need this energy right away. It's better if you get all 3 mexes, because if you have metal, you can always make more energy just with solars, because solars are 0 energy, right? So to optimize this, instead go max, max, wind, max, and then your other 4 wind. You don't need the 2 wind right away. And you get your 3rd one, and we've got the 2. Oh, all right. So your lab is 1800 energy. For a bot lab, which is a little bit cheaper, you can do it, which is 1200. You can generally do it off like 60. A lot of times for vehicles, you want like plus 70. You can't build this right now. You're just going to e-stall. So you're going to be really far behind. And that's why an optimal build is max, max, wind, max, and then wind, 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 because you don't have the energy income to actually fund this. What you need to do here is drop a solar so that you actually have the energy to fund this, right? Here, even though you have the metal and you have the build power, this is building slowly because you could be using 80, but you are only using 40 because that's all you have. So you recognize that, and you're going to build a solar, which is awesome. And then we're going to come back. Now you're at 71, and now you can just knock this thing out and you'll be good to go. All right, and what do we have queued? We've got 3 cons queued. I don't hate the 3 con opening 100%, but I would say one thing that's nice to do, instead of opening 3 con, drop 1 rover or 2 rovers really early, sometimes as your first units, and go exploring, man. Go see what's on the map out here. Go see what this guy's doing. Go see what this guy's doing. Go see what this guy's doing. Or a lot of times you might run into another scout and you can kill it, but you want to know who you're playing against and kind of where they are so that you know how to react and what to do. If you think about it just in terms of metal, right? Cons are 135 and you only have 350 right now. For you to build all those cons, you're going to eat so much initial metal, and then you won't have a lot of metal left over to fight, right? Or to make military units. So I would say better if you can open like rover, a couple cons, maybe a few more rovers, like 5 rovers, and then another con, and then you can start building stouts and Janus, and you could also build blitz, but blitz aren't really there. Okay. So let's look at the attack range of this bad boy. I think it's not bad, especially early on, to have an LLT in base. I think you probably could have built it a little bit later because you shouldn't have your comm walk out too early. You want to build more energy because you're e-stalling. The position of it actually isn't that bad. Ticks can still run down and run up these, but something like a rover wouldn't be able to get past there. And it might be able to sneak through there, but hopefully it would stop it. So I don't hate this. I just think it comes too early. I think instead you want to do 2 things. One is you want to be building more energy because you barely have enough energy as is, and the wind is good. So instead you just want to drop like 4 wind, and then you want to boost your lab. Your lab only has 100 build power, right? That's very little build power in the grand scheme of things. Your commander has 300 build power. So after you build a couple windmills and you have the energy, just boost your lab, because the faster you can get out constructors, the faster that they can go and take other mexes. They can scale the wind individually, right? And constructors are awesome for scaling your economy anyway. In addition to their build power, they give you 10 energy a second. Well, 8 energy a second if they're bots, 10 energy a second if they're vehicle cons, right? And so in a situation like this where you're desperately starved for energy, if you get out these cons, it's like you go from 80 to 90, or you go from 90 to 100 energy. So I'd say for those reasons, delay this LLT, get some energy, and boost this con. Okay. And you're going to comm walk super early. So I don't think it's bad to comm walk early. The reason why it's an issue here is that this thing is going to take forever to get out and start doing other things. And generally speaking, it's a good idea to use your commander's build power and dump all the metal you have before you leave base. Because you're going to build like, you're going to build, you go from 100 to 400 build power, right? You're going to build much, much quicker. So before you kind of go meandering about and say, hey, what's out in the world? Get rid of all your metal, right? And if you look at your allies, right, like he doesn't have any metal, he doesn't have any metal. A lot of these guys don't have metal, and that's what you want. I think you and Green both have the most metal, but utilize your commander's build power before he runs out. If you get out 2 cons, you've scaled your energy and you will have dumped more of your metal. Another small note about the mexes on this, some are 2.8s, some are 1.8s. A lot of times if you want to get to mid faster, it makes sense to tap the 2.8s and then get to mid, and then you can have cons backfill the 1s. But that's a preference thing, and it depends kind of the style that you're playing. But just be aware that not all mexes are the same. So if you come, if you're here and you're like, which mex do I take? You want to take the 2.8s first. All right, we have your first con out, and he's going to boost your second con. And you're eventually going to e-stall if this keeps up, but let's see. So first con is boosting, which I think is a great choice. You're doing well there. Second con is boost. Okay, so second con boosts. And where is this guy going? He is going to go max, max, and then hopefully wind, so you can E-scale. Perfect. So I think this is a great thing to do with like your second con. That totally makes sense to me. All right, you're going to tap some of these mexes on the way, but you're going to mid, which makes sense there. When you build wind, especially with the drunkenness of vehicle con drivers, I wouldn't space it like this. I would space it either in rows of 2, like this, like so a row of 2, and then another row of 2, and then another row of 2 with a space between all of them. Those won't chain. Like if one of them dies, you know, it's not like they kill one and everything dies. Or you can do it Kuchi style where he goes 3 like this. So he'll build 3, and then you can fill in that, and then there'll be perfect 1 rows with a space between. You can do either, but when you build like this, what I find that happens is your vehicle con will like start building these, and then he'll kind of get stuck, or you can like pin yourself in between them, and it's really frustrating. So I think it's more efficient if you build them in rows of 2, or if you do like a bigger spacing with them. But the concept for what you want to do there is completely fine and makes sense to me. So good work there. All right, so your first military units are Blitz. And I'm not completely against it, but I also am not in full support of it. When you think about early starting units, one of the best things you can make are rovers, because rovers are incredibly fast, right? They're 168 speed. A Blitz is 99, and rovers are really cheap. And we don't know what's out there, right? We haven't really seen anything that's over here. You don't know if you're fighting against a strong player, a weak player. You don't know if they opened bots, if they opened vehicles, any of that. So instead of dropping the 218 on 2 Blitz, I think it's better if you actually drop it on, you know, the equivalent in rovers, which would be around 7 rovers. 1, because you can scout multiple areas, right? And you can see what's there, and they're faster. But also, if you want to be aggressive with them, which you should, because you kind of want to run like this and then see, you know, what's going on all in here. Blitz, when they die, rarely get overkilled, so they'll leave a wreck. Rovers, when they die, routinely just explode into nothing, and so there's no reclaim. You're not donating any metal, you're just dealing damage and getting information, which is what you want. With that said, Blitz are better defensively as long as they're not getting outrun. So if something is like, if there's like ticks running into them, at least the Blitz can fight back. With that said, I would say that rovers would be better in this situation. You're going to take the 2.8 and then go. Okay, I like that. And then you have a con coming up here, and he is going to build 1 mechs and then some LLTs. All right, so you miss a mechs here, which that's just a mechanical thing that happens to everyone, right? But you always want to try to take mexes as soon as possible, because, right, it's cumulative. The longer you have a mex, the more metal it provides. So taking it as soon as possible is great. I don't know if you need the LLTs here right away, but you know, I'm not against it, especially if you look at this guy and you say, all right, he's maybe a little bit lower TS and he doesn't have a lot of units here, so I want to make sure I don't get rated like this. I think that's fine. I would say when you go here, especially with the new engine, it's easier to build high ground. I think instead of building there, you actually could have built on the high ground, and you can just build a high ground LLT here, which 1 will give you a little bit better vision like this, and then it can shoot stuff that's right here, right? Because if you have an LLT here, it's not gonna be able to hit this area right here, whereas a high ground one right here can hit that area, and you'll have a little bit better vision. So you could probably high ground build there, but that's like a really minor little min-max thing. All right, so your comm is doing that, and you're going to come here, build the LLT, and then take the max. You could maybe argue to do it reverse, but because you haven't scouted and you don't know what you're going against, I can understand why you'd want the LLT first. The only thing that's missing from this maybe is like radar, early radar, but that's fine. You're taking those and you're doing that. And we have 3 nanos or construction turrets queued. So there's 2 kind of issues with this. First is you only have 12 metal a second. And even when you take the rest of these, you're not going to have the income to actually use all of that build power. Each of these is 200, right? So you're looking at 600, 700, 780. That's like way excessive early on. I think for this lane, you would want 1 and then maybe 2 at like 5 minutes, and you can add a few more later. So the first is you don't have the resources to spend it. The second reason why I don't like this is you're about to e-stall really hard once these come online, and it's going to be a problem. You're at max wind right now, and you're spending more than you're making, right? And the only reason you're able to do that is because your team is overflowing because everyone built wind. But when that wind drops, guess what's going to happen? This is going to plummet, and you're not going to be able to actually build these, right? The other problem with this is when you start building this and it takes longer than just a normal construction bot, you're not making military units. So instead of doing that, I think something that would make more sense earlier on is to build another con, right? And you can just have another con that comes here. And then in addition to resolving your energy, because it gives you that 10 energy, then you get the additional build power. A nano is more cost efficient per metal, but I think especially in this energy situation, you don't want to do it. You would just want to get like another con until you fix your energy, and then you can get a nano. All right, let us charge ahead. So you've got the con coming, your con is doing that. And you're building a lot of blitz. So blitz are kind of, they're a unit that excel on wide open maps, and your lane is not one of those. So if you're going to make blitz, I would make only a few because you want to like use them to kind of do defensive things, or maybe raid. But if you want to raid, I think rovers are a little bit easier and make more sense to use there. Instead of blitz, I would just make stouts. Or I'd probably make stouts or whistlers or some combination of those, right? Stout, Janus, whistler. You wouldn't necessarily want to make Arty until you see LLTs, but making 1 Arty early on can be useful. All right, and we're still spamming blitz. Blitz are really hard to spam because you can't man fight any T1 unit. Right? Blitz don't trade well into stouts, into Janus, especially if they're LLTs. So even if you have them, if there's a wall of LLTs here, you're not going to be able to break them with blitz, right? You want that metal into something that can actually push the lane and kind of affect everyone around you. The one situation where they could be good is if this guy pushes through and then you can like send your blitz and raid, or alternatively if he pushes past here and then you can send your blitz behind his army and raid. But in general, you want to focus on your lane first, and blitz aren't going to be good into these chokes. With that said, we see our first aggressive play and you're pushing out, so awesome. Wait, what is this double radar? All right, we'll go back and look at that in a second. You have a radar here and you have a radar here. So first of all, early radar, big check mark, awesome, right? The joke is Claret is requesting radar. You always want radar early on. These 2 radars are a little weird for me though, because if we look at them, right, and we see their placement, this guy is going to see this. This guy is going to see this. So your ally here should build a radar. You probably don't need one here. And the one here is blocked by everything, right? It doesn't actually see that much. And this one's blocked by this. Similar to how you can build an LLT up there, your commander can just walk here and build a radar like there. And that radar is going to see more than either of the 2 radars you saw, with the exception of kind of back here, which isn't as big of a deal. And importantly, a low ground radar doesn't see the high ground here, whereas a high ground radar does. And so that's why instead of building 2 radars there, I would just build 1 radar higher up here, and you could do it something like that. But good for you on taking radar, and here comes the raid. Yeah, so you're really overbuilding nanos. Look at how E-stalled you are. All right, so before we look at this raid and what we see, if you ever find yourself in this situation and you're like making nanos and you have a ton of metal, but you don't have energy, the really easy fix is you just make solars. You just go like this, right? And the reason why is because solars are 0 energy, right? They're 155 metal, but they're 0 energy, and they're only like 2800 BP. So they build, that BP is the green number. So they build real quick. So you can just go boom, and then you can even leave that one unbuilt for a second, but you can just build, and then go back and finish that. And then that boost in energy will help stabilize your economy. So when you find yourself in this situation where metal and no energy, drop solars. Okay. And here are your blitz. So I like this. We're going to get a max. We get a con. Oh, no, wait, get the con. Nice. All right. So we're going to get a con, which I think is great. So you kill the mechs, you kill the con. So you've almost paid for these blitz. But when you're doing raids like this, something that's really nice is to split them so that... What on earth? Hold on. Okay, so this is funny, but so I would say with all the information you have, you absolutely made the right move. You found a hole, you exploited it, A+. It doesn't work out here because this guy started air and has Shuris, which shouldn't happen, and would be much harder to do if you had opened rovers and you had run like this, right? And you had harassed all these guys. You would have A, seen his air start, and B, probably been able to harass him, because if you have a bunch of rovers and they don't like, there's no core gunship, all they can do is Shuri, you can run around, pick off mexes, do all sorts of stuff. But with the information you have, this is absolutely the right play to try to roll in here. Unfortunately, both of these are dead, but there's no way for you to have known that. However, you see an air player. I would say you should do 2 things in this situation. 1, tell your team, hey, orange is air, because this is a lane map and normally no one ever opens air. So if they do open air, it means that someone over here, you're not sure where orange is, but you think he's somewhere over here, right? Someone over here is air. So on the ground, this should be 2v3, which means ideally when you play with more aggressive players who have like higher map awareness, they can go, oh yeah, it's 2v3. Let's collapse in and let's push and kill everything here. The other reason why it's really important when you see someone start air is that you need to prepare anti-air. So even just 1 nettle in your base, right, will help in case a bomber comes, right? If you have 1 nettle initially and then the bombers start coming, you can drop another nettle and another nettle, you'll be fine. Your nettle will also kill any scouts. But more importantly, eventually you'll start playing with like degenerate players like Skag or Choice, and they love to calm bomb. And so what that means is they're going to get their commander in a transport and they're going to fly like this, where there's as little vision as possible. And they're going to run up and they're going to drop their commander in your base or maybe slightly outside your base. And then they're going to run up and they're going to de-gun and they're just going to kill your entire base. And they're going to keep going until someone runs back and deals with it. And the easiest way to stop that is just like 1 nettle right there and maybe like another nettle right there or something, so that if they try to run up and attack like this and they're coming up, the nettle will shoot and kill them. Or worst case, they see the nettle and they turn around like this, and that gives you time to build LLTs, defenses, or react in some way to a commander that's coming. But the fact that there's the open for air should set off a bunch of alarm bells, right? So first, this should be a weak lane that you can push. Second, it means that you need to get anti-air like in your base just in case, right? And for comm drops or for bombs. And then third, other people might be really focused on their lanes, right? He's like fighting here or doing this. And he's like, oh my God, you know, my oven's on fire or something. They don't see that there's Shuris here. So you want to tell them, you want to say, hey, orange is air, right? Just let your people know what's going on in the game. Also, just a minor, man, you got to take this max. Take him. A minor update here. You don't really see like units here because you already have a couple LLTs. I would actually take the mexes first because you want to hold those as long as possible because they're 2.8s, right? Those things pay for themselves so quickly that even if they die later, just holding them for a bit is more value. Another thing that you can do, but you wouldn't be able to do in this situation is contested mexes like this, where you're like, hey, I think this is going to die. If you have the energy and the metal, sometimes it's nice to put twilights on them because routinely the enemy is going to run up here and they're going to look and they're going to, okay, he doesn't have the mex. And then they just go back home, right? Because the twilight is cloaked. Whereas if there is a mex, they'll run up here and then the arty will shoot and kill it and it dies, right? So if you twilight it, a lot of times it actually will survive much longer. And it's great for contested mexes like that. So it's 5 minutes. And we have very, very little energy income, right? And that is a problem because you have so much metal. Again, like I said before in this situation, drop down solars. Another kind of timing thing, around 5 minutes, I would say always get an energy storage. You only have 1300 energy, right? You need the e-storage so that one, if the wind drops, you have kind of the buffer against it. And additionally, right, you need the 1000 energy to move while cloaked, 100 energy to stand still while cloaked, or you want to be able to actually fire your D-gun and kill stuff. So in this one, it's a little hard because you don't have the energy and you're burning all of your energy and all of your build power into nanos that you don't have the energy to use. But if you had a better energy economy, around 5 minutes, energy storage is where it's at. All right. These poor blitz are just chilling. Okay. So you have him go there and then you have him build this. Always, I would say something that I always want to reiterate with like newer players is have stupidly long build queues that always end up somewhere productive. So an example is like this guy, he's going to spend probably 10 minutes building all of these, but it's 10 minutes well spent, right? And you could even like queue up more and maybe he spends the entire game building wind and back, but that's fine because he's actively doing something. One thing that can be concerning when you do something like this is he's going to build, and then because you don't have another thing queued, he's just going to sit here. So on something like this, you could either, after you queue up that, you could maybe queue up wind or something, or something I do is I do that, I hold shift, and then I just right click on my commander. And so I know I'll be looking at my commander, and when this guy's done building and he does all his stuff, then later he's going to come up here and he's going to come to my commander and I'm going to be like, wait, why is there a con here? Oh, okay, my con can build other stuff, right? So long build queues that end in something active. Alternatively, for a situation like this, you can have him, right? Like you would want to build a bunch of solar. So you build solar and then you build e-storage and then hold shift and just right click on the lab. And so he'll go and he'll build all that stuff. He'll build the e-storage. And then when he's done building stuff, he's just going to put his build power back into the lab, right? But it's like those little efficiencies that'll help a lot. Because otherwise, who knows how long this guy will stand here. All right, so now you're taking these mexes, which I like. The one thing I will say that I don't like here is you saw an opening here, right? You could still send these other blitz in to see other things. And if nothing else, while you're here and there's nothing here, you want to get vision. So a great thing to do, granted you would need more economy for it because beholders are 10 energy a second to remain cloaked, but you could roll up and you could drop like a camera. I'd probably drop a camera maybe like here or there, right? A camera here will give you vision of this area. And so you'll see everything that comes up, and it's super valuable because you're vehicles. So you could literally bring artillery right here. And if there's like a mech or an army or something else, your artillery can just shoot over and start killing all of this stuff. And if he wants to attack you, he needs to run through this narrow choke, and your commander can just be here and your commander can just de-gun anything that comes, right? So your commander's here, you might as well get vision. The other thing that you could do that might be nice in this situation, I don't actually know if there's a good placement for it, is you could do a high ground radar here, right? So that radar doesn't show you quite as much, but it still might be good to know, right? Like if you had a radar, say here, you'd see troops going this way and you'd see troops that are right here. So you'd be able to tell the guy's top, like, hey, there's troops coming here, or you'd see reinforcements here. Or if someone came down here, you would see those, right? So because you're here, you might as well try to sneak in the vision as well. All right. You've seen these dots and we still don't know what they are. If nothing else, even if you don't want to commit, just run one blitz down and see what this is. You always have to scout, right? We always need to know what these are, because if these are all LLTs, you could just make one artillery. Oh God, we're still making blitz. All right, but you have RDQ'd. You could just make one artillery and you could just kill it all. But if these are pawns, right, you might be able to push down and do it. You see that there's LLTs here on some regard, right? But you don't know what the full mixture is. And so you want to see what units are here so that you know what units to make. So I would say scout this, and then these units are just chilling. Have them go do stuff, man. Even though they're Ashuris, maybe attack that or something else. But don't just have them sit. That's something that we're all guilty of when we play bar. You know, it's like no one has perfect APM, but whenever possible, try to be active with units. Is this your third radar? Okay, so you've got 3 radars. I already talked about better placement, right? The other problem with radars is like you're dropping metal and energy for it, and I don't think this guy is going to see, right? So that guy will see that, which is a little more, but this one's just better. It's just all around better. So that's just something that if you play the map, you'll be familiar with. And with the engine change, it's easier to build higher up. Whoa, okay. So this is scary, right? Just by seeing that movement, maybe you didn't see it because you weren't looking at the front, but you see movement up here. And this can only be air at this point in the game, right? So as soon as you see these, one, if you had a camera, you would have seen it, right? But also, you can just walk your comm over and you can just build an LLT. Or, because you know it's air, just walk your comm over like kind of against here and drop, or maybe like there so that it's in range of all the air, and drop a nettle, and you can just start picking off whatever is there. The problem is we don't know what's here. And so it might be better to build an LLT. It might be better to build a nettle. I would probably go nettle and then LLT, because once you have the nettle, the LLT can kill anything that's there. And it'll give you vision as well. Okay. We got this max. This max is pain. Oh, someone has it queued. All right, we're good. Someone's going to take it eventually. And you have another guy coming back to boost this. So I like the concept. You want to have more people building wind to scale your energy. Check. I would say in this situation, it's not going to work as well, because what happens, especially with vehicle cons, is he's going to come up and he's going to like help him build this. And then maybe they build this and then they need to build this one, right? And so like, the guy who's here is going to come here, and then this column that's following is like going to go there, and then it's blocked, and then he needs to go there. And it's like a demolition derby, and it's super, super painful and annoying. So instead, I would say just have him build separately, right? Have one guy build like that, and then have this guy build like that. And so you have them building separately. Like, yes, do they build slightly slower and they're not like done, you know, you don't have them online as quick. At the end of the day, you're going to be building them quicker because they're not running into each other and they're separate. And so you can kind of spread them out a little bit more. But I like the concept. And now we're building stouts. Oh, and we get a little bit of D-gun action here. But you were trying to be aggressive, so good job there. And you've got your comm. So your comm, in this case, definitely you want to be doing that. But also, you can build more LLTs like along here, right? Until you get attacked back, I would say you want to LLT creep as much as you can. When in doubt, LLT creep. Okay, so you see it and you build a nettle, A+. The only issue with this nettle is it's too far back. If it was just forward a little bit, you could kill whatever is there. And then also your commander can build there and I don't know, we'll have to look in a second, but whatever is here, if it's on the edge, you can degun as long as you're directly under it. So you just need to walk like here and then fire. If they build it farther back, sometimes it won't reach, but you could also LLT it. But if it's like on the edge here or here or here, you can literally just come here and then shoot and kill it. Whoa. Okay, so you recognize like, hey, I have these units and I want to do something with them. But this is the issue with Blitz, is that Blitz can't push. They can raid and they can kind of skirmish, but they lose against any other vehicle essentially, right? Because Janus can kite them into Westlers can kite them into LLTs. Janus and these numbers can just shoot and slow them and AoE kill them, and then Stouts can just man fight them. So I like that you had made units and I like that you tried to do something with them, but you can't fight them into LLTs. In that situation, it makes more sense to maybe try to do something like that, or just to keep them in reserve. Alternatively, if you didn't have metal, oh my God, if you didn't have metal, you could totally just eat them and it'd be fine. Oh, okay. You recognize that you have an energy problem, so you're building more energy. A+. The issue is you're building the wrong kind of energy for this situation. The reason why is because A solars cost 5,000 energy. And you are e-stalling, essentially. So instead of building A solars right away, if you just build a few solars first, then you will have the energy to build more A solars. Also, I would say because A solars are BP intensive, right? They're almost 8,000 build power. It makes more sense to build these closer here next to your nanos, right? Like you could build them here to where they're not on the front line, but they're within range of your nanos so that you can dump all this metal that you have. Now, next thing is a little bit more of like a metagaming moment that isn't specific to your situation, but just to kind of talk through lane maps and Bismuth. Somewhere between 5 to 8 minutes, probably like sooner for higher TS games where people are more aggressive, and later, like more around 7 or 8 minutes in like lower TS games where people are a bit more passive, you're going to have an established front, right? And the established front is where everyone meets. And yours kind of loosely looks like this. And once you get to this point in the game, I guess yours maybe it looks a little bit more like that. We can do that. Once you get to this point in the game, you want to start thinking about sort of like the next step, right? Okay, he's in his lane, everyone's in their lanes, and maybe you can push through and win your lane, but in this one, you're not really sure what's there. So you want to think, okay, what do we do from here? And there's sort of 3 common situations that will happen. So the first is where you shove another lane. And that means you have some sentries and you have an army. And instead of trying to fight your opponent here, where you're equal metal, you leave your defenses in your commander and you take your army and you attack with someone else's army. And the reason you do that is because your commander and a few LLTs can kind of hold a lane, especially if you have a jammer, which you should have had here, but I'll talk about that in a second. Your commander and like some LLTs can hold a lane long enough that your army can do something somewhere else. But the reason why you want to shove another lane is that, let's say, for example, here, let's just look. In terms of, disregarding LLTs, just in terms of military units, right? This guy has 910 metal worth of units, and this guy has 1702. So he's ahead of him anyway, and he probably could have killed all this with rocket bots. But if you bring down, say, another 1,000 metal worth of units, and then you guys fight, you're going to overwhelmingly crush this guy before anyone can help him a lot of times. And then you can just go back to your lane. And the reason you want to do that is if you crush someone, you're going to have fewer losses, and you can just go back, right? So around 8 minutes, like 5 to 8 minutes, when things starts to stall, stop looking at your lane as much and start looking at other lanes around you and go, hey, all right, I can't push through here. Can I attack here? Can I attack here? Can I attack here? Right? And you kind of did that when you were looking at your blitz before and going up there to help your ally. But And that was like, that's a good idea. It just wasn't executed quite as well. But that's the first thing, is shove. Okay, and the second thing you can do is tech. So you already have all this metal, right? And you want to go tier 2. Around this time, like 8 minutes, if you aren't planning on going T2, look at your allies. A lot of times someone should be going T2. In this game, it doesn't look like anyone is, but if you look and no one is going T2, you can probably go T2 yourself if your lane isn't losing. Or if you look and someone is going T2, you can just donate all of your metal to them. You can just say, hey, you know, here's 1,500 metal. They'll get their T2 quicker. They can give you a T2 con, and then you can do all of this stuff. So you can either shove another lane, tech, or you can bomb. And so you just drop a plant, you build bombers, and you fly and you attack here. In this game, you already saw that this guy went air, so that might not be as good of an idea because he probably still has an air plant, and so he could make fighters easily. But in other games where there isn't an air player, a sudden bombing run at like 10 minutes can just end the game, right? You just eat your lab here, drop the airplane plant, and then go kill like 2 to 3 players. Generally speaking, when you bomb like that, you want to kill like 1 or 2 people and just completely bomb them into ruins, because other people will start building AA. But it kind of depends on the game. So in this situation, you can't really do too many of those things because you feel like you're getting shoved in, but those are just things to think about. I said before, so you don't have the energy for it, but something that's super critical on a lot of these frontline plays is the use of jammers. Like if you have, especially as arm, because they're cloaked, right? A jammer that has energy is completely invisible to the enemy. So you could drop a jammer like here. And then when those units come down, if you have energy storage, your commander, you can cloak him and run him up. And right when they get here, you just D-gun and kill them. Oh my God, it's an agitator. Rise heaven, eat your heart out. Okay, so in this one, you see an agitator firing. And so you make the right call. Perfect, you're gonna come up here and you're gonna D-gun. You see it, and these can actually probably just kill it. And you just gotta get a little closer and D-gun. So good play. Oh, wait, no. Oh man, so if you just gone a little more, you totally would have done it. I think you panicked because you saw like grunts and stuff coming, but you had the right play. You just needed to execute it a little bit better. So good job, good thinking. It was just slightly mistaken in execution, but no worries. Okay, so you haven't done this, and this thing's going to be able to really push back a lot of your units here. It's going to push you back here. This is another situation where you want a jammer, because if you have a jammer, all right, your ally above you dies. Whenever that happens, you really want to try to get your comm up there or help somehow, because that's a lot of metal, right? And you want to try to capitalize on that metal. In this situation, you kind of can't, but whenever you see an ally die, if possible, always go try to assist. Back to the original point though, if you build a jammer here, even though this thing has range, if they don't have vision, which I doubt they do, right? So they know there's like some LLTs and some stuff here because he ran down, but most of this is radar dots. So if you have a jammer and they can't see the radar dots, then they won't be able to fire at them, right? They can't fire at them accurately. The other thing you can do, even if they do have that, is you can get like a little rover and you can just have him patrol like this. And a lot of times what happens is it'll fire and fire and fire, and it'll just end up missing the whole time because he's running back and forth. All right, so we're starting to scale up our e-economy a bit. I mean, that's just standard. I wouldn't say that's super cheesy. And I would say now the game is kind of starting to get out of control a little bit. So this is something that's going to come with a little bit more experience, but it looks like bot is struggling and it looks like mid is struggling, right? This guy didn't really push up in his lane. He looks like he's new. So his commander should be up here and his commander should be up here, and you guys should have been able to do a lot more. But at the end of the day, you have to play the game you're given, right? So blue looks like it's doing okay, and he has T2. So these are your top TS players. You're gonna kind of hope that they'll be able to kill the bottom TS players eventually, or do relatively well. In this situation, when you look at the map and you're like, uh-oh, this is going bad, you need to think about, how can I die as slowly as possible? And it sounds funny, but there are tons of games that are literally won by who dies slower, right? Can the bottom players roll up through here and clean everything? Or can the top players roll down through here and clear everything, right? And so there are tons of times where, yes, this lane wins and they look very triumphant killing everything, but the real game is decided like right here when the push that could have killed everyone is stopped. So when you see you guys are kind of in a losing position, I would say you want to consider, how can you defend and how can you pork this, right? How can you turtle up here and hold as much of it as possible? It's a lot harder with T1, but it's definitely easier in T2. But yeah, this game's starting to get away from you guys, so let me speed it up. I would have gone T2 much sooner, but that's life. We're gonna come back. All right, now you're gonna drop your T2. All right, do you see how you have 0 energy, or sorry, 0 metal? You need to just eat this lab, and you don't, once you commit to going T2, you wanna stop building anything else aside from maybe like wind in the back. And the reason why you want to do that is because the sooner you get your T2 lab up, the sooner you can get a T2 con. And the sooner you can get a T2 con, the sooner you can upgrade your mexes. And the sooner you can upgrade your mexes, the sooner that you can actually jumpstart your economy, right? So you want, as soon as you make this decision to go T2, you want it to happen as quickly and efficiently as possible. So what that means is you want to eat this lab so all the metal goes into there. And if you had better energy production, even still, I'd probably eat this solar so that the energy goes into there so you can get these up. You still really need energy storage, but I would say that stop building everything else, get your T2 up. If you still want a T1 lab later, like for scout spam, you just rebuild it. But the point is, the faster you get this up, the faster your economy gets jump started to T2. So making it take longer is not a good idea. All right. Because you're kind of starting to lose agency, let's speed it up a bit. So a lot of people are kind of pushing here, doing other things. You help out on this side, which I like. Always try to reclaim mexes if you can. Okay, wait, what? So your T2 lab is done. Among other things, as soon as you have a T2 lab, you shouldn't make any more T1 units. The only T1 units that you would ever really want to make are cons if you need one for some specific T1 building, like if you want to make more nanos, but you can actually make nanos from consoles, or scouts to spam. Aside from that, once you have T2, it makes no sense to make T1 units because generally speaking, metal per metal, T1 units will just, or T2 metal per metal, T2 units will always be better than T1 units in like 90% of cases. And it's even worse because you don't have the metal to upgrade these mexes because you're making whistlers. And all these T1 units just die to any T2 units, right? Like whistlers die to all T2. Stouts can fight some T2, but once fiends and other things come out, they'll definitely die. Shell shockers are only good versus pork, and you can't really push into the pork here anyway. All right. We see these starting to fire. And as you get more familiar with the game, you'll recognize projectiles. These are tier 2 plasma projectiles. And the person here was core bots, which means that these, and they're pretty recognizable, these are Sheldons, right? These are tier 2 mortar bot artillery. And the way you deal with them is with Mausers. Or you can go Rattlesnake. And similar to how you could build like a high ground LLT and to help like defend stuff over here, you can totally just rattle somewhere up here and you'd be able to stop all of it. So when you see these start to fire, I would immediately, well, first, this should have been eaten, and you actually don't need this much BP because you don't even have the metal for it. You're about to drop 600 metal in nanos when you don't have the metal generation, and you need this up first. But back to Sheldon's. We go Mauser, 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 like 5 Mausers or so. You want a jammer and a radar, and you can actually make a stealthed gremlin. And your gremlin can come up and just weave through all the fights, and he can give you direct vision. And then your Mausers, which would be here, can then shoot and kill all of the Sheldons. So artillery battles like this are really predicated on vision. And as long as you have superior vision or equal vision, Mausers are always going to kill Sheldon. And that's because Sheldons are 850, I think. Sheldons are 850 range, and Mausers are a 940. So Mausers just have the range advantage. And if you come up and you start shooting, you'll be able to kill these, especially because while he has a jammer, and he has snipers, which you can also kill with Mausers as well, right? Even though he has a jammer and everything else, a stealth gremlin can come up here and give you vision, and then your Mausers can just kill. All right, let us continue, but we might just want to speed up and look at the last few things. So we talked about when you get to T2, you want to up these mexes first, get rid of your T1. If you do want to scout spam, you'd actually go Tick instead of Rover, I would say is better. Okay, so in a situation like this where we've seen, even from your vision, right? You've seen that there's a bunch of Sheldons and there's a bunch of Fiends. You have the idea to pork, which I think is great. That's awesome. But you probably, this one might be fine because you want to kind of protect against that. I probably would have porked further up, like before they started pushing. But in this situation where they're pushing in and you're not 100% sure, Plasma has reduced range to high ground, and it has increased range from high ground to low ground. So these you can totally build on the high ground like that, and they'll just have more range. In this specific situation, I think you could literally just drop a rattle. I'd probably drop it there. Like if you had a jammer and you put a rattle right there, a rattle there is going to help the guy above you, right? Because it'll kill the stuff here and it will control all the space down there. But what you could have done, when you saw the Sheldons there, if you had some jammers and you kind of held them back for a bit, if you just put literally one rattlesnake, I would say right here, look at how much of middle that one rattlesnake controls, right? You control all of this. You can actually help up there a little bit. You can help that. So in those situations where it's like, oh, I might get pushed in by artillery, one rattlesnake, a lot of times, as long as you have vision, can just completely stop them because it totally outranges them. It has massive AoE. In this situation where they've pushed in a little more, you can still definitely, I'd probably rattle like there. If you rattle here, it won't be able to shoot stuff that's close, but it can shoot stuff that's farther away. But you could rattle. I don't hate the pit bulls, though. I think that's definitely kind of a good idea because you want to pork because this whole side is dying, right? And it looks like your top might be winning. Your top is doing other stuff. So you want to die as slowly as possible. So how do you do that? You pork. And you have all of these boosted and they're going to start tapping mexes. So you probably won't be able to tap these mexes, but and what are we building? As a general rule, I would say you almost never, especially as arm, you almost never need more than like 3 to 5 artillery, because artillery is only good at shooting buildings. It's not good at attacking units. So you generally don't want them on a repeat queue. The only time you would is if you were core and you were going to do like a pounder Wolverine slow push. But as arm, we don't want it, and this lab should be gone in general. In terms of your unit, your tier 2 unit comp, I like this minus the bull because you just don't have the energy for it. But Jag Mauser is definitely a really strong early T2. I would probably do more Mauser and less Jag though. I do like a 2-to-1 mix, because the Jags are only there when like fiends or something else get close, and the Mausers are able to kill everything else that's farther away. And especially because you're fighting into Sheldons, it'd be much stronger if you did that instead. You're finally floating energy, so you could maybe drop a converter, but it's not the end of the world. So Sheldons are fragile when you just run at them, and so that's what this guy does. And this is actually amazing for you guys. This is a huge feed. Okay, so when you have a fight like this where the enemy comes like charging in like, we're here to win, and then you just kill their entire army, super important that you have a bot lab or you have some cons and you reclaim all of this. There's 8,000 metal on the ground, right? That's almost an entire Aphis. That's 8 bulls, right? If you, after you kill all this, you want to come down here and you want to eat all of it as soon as possible. Or if you have a bot lab and you have res bots, you want to come in here and you want to eat the T1, but you want to res the starlights and the bulls, right? If you come in here and you res, what is this? You could get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can get 6 bulls and a starlight, and then you could eat the remaining Rex, right? And that would put you massively ahead. And you could probably res the Sheldons too if you wanted. Okay, so we can watch the end of this, but the only other thing I would say is at this point, you kind of want to start scaling, and the easiest way to scale, which you start to do here, is to pork your lane and then just start scaling with like fusions, affusions, etc. Because the game is super messed up, you could definitely try to hold some rattlesnakes and some other stuff here, but because top has done a lot of work, so that, yeah, that's, I mean, we talked about anti-air because you saw that they had an air player before. Because top is like potentially winning, you want to die slow here as long as possible. So that's why I think like high ground rattlesnakes, or even like some more pit bulls, right? Like a rattlesnake here, some more pit bulls. There's even free mexes here that you could run up and claim. It's kind of amazing that they didn't take these behind you. That we talked about before. You should high ground build, right? If it was there, it sees quite a bit more. Oh, I guess it's lower actually. So I'd do it like there, somewhere else. Yeah, we already talked about that. So you're scaling, except that all of your build power and all of your resources aren't with this. If you want to do this, I would say either drop another set, either drop another set of nanos here, or build these kind of like in a box here so that they won't chain, but that you can use this build power to build those. I'm probably just going to stop it there. You guys are sort of, yeah, you guys are just going to get overrun relatively soon because bot is going to die. But the big takeaways for me were really cleaning up your early game macro and just kind of like a build order, right? You want to try to use all of your metal early on, and you want to use all your metal early on, and then you want to make some units and you want to scout, and you really want to scale your energy production. You had a long time where you just couldn't really do anything because you were just E-starved for like 15 minutes. Beyond that, try to use the high ground a little bit more and try to be more aggressive. Instead of the blitz you had, right, you could have had rovers and you could have been aggressive with those. You also, when you saw the LLTs and other stuff here, you could have built maybe a couple shell shockers, or you could have gone whistler and you could have just started chipping away at the grunts and everything else there. In terms of your actual like unit comp, once you had done that, we don't really want to make very many shell shockers ever. Like just try to make like 4 or 5, like 3 to 5, and just keep them alive as long as possible. When the game starts to go south like this, you want to try to survive as long as possible, and you want to die slowly. So there's definitely some good opportunities to try to pork and try to hold other stuff. You want to stop building T1 units as soon as you go T2, because you want to get all of your mexes up. And when you're fighting into Sheldons like this, you can just kill all of them with Mausers. And with Mausers as long as you have vision. So you want jammers and radar like you have, but if you also have a gremlin, which is invisible, you can just run the gremlin up as long as it doesn't touch anything, and then your Mausers can shoot and they can kill, right? Your Mauser back here can hit that. Oh, you can't even, hold on. So this guy can hit here while your Mauser can hit him, right? So that's the range difference. And if you have a vision advantage, you can totally just shoot and kill it. So that is more or less the end of the game. I think there are a lot of times where you had the right idea, but you just didn't quite execute it well. And that'll just come with like more practice, more playing, and just getting in other situations. But I think that these are like role maps like this, or sorry, lane maps like this are the best places to learn, because they teach you a lot of things that you won't learn in role maps. So good job kind of branching out and playing in map rotations and doing that. But yeah, just try to clean up a little bit of your play. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask me on the Discord.